Welcome back to part 2 of our Create and Point Manager menu. In this video, we will be going over line offsets, radius offsets, and finding a center point between two lines. Let's start at the very beginning with our line offsets. The first thing to note is our Edit button at the bottom of our page. Let's click in there and see what parameters we can enter. First, we can choose how far off of a line we want to offset. Also, we can choose the interval between points along that line. We can also change the start distance of where our first point along that line will start. If we would put 5 feet in here, then we will have a line starting 5 foot from the beginning of that line. So let's change some of these parameters and see how it works. Let's make our offset 3 feet. Let's make the interval every 6 inches. Start distance, let's start 2 feet down that line. We'll get out of our pen and paper input button and let's offset this line on the right hand side. To do that, I can either click on the line itself. Notice how it's making those offsets for me already. Or alternatively, let's hit the clear button. I can choose 2 points to define a line. So in that way, there doesn't even need to be a physical line between them. We can create our own line and the offsets to that in our Create and Point Manager menu. Let's clear this and go back to our original line. Here you can see at the bottom of the screen, we have a 3-foot offset horizontally from our line, and we have a point every 6 inches going down that line. We started 2 feet from the beginning of this line going down. Now, before we would create all of these points, notice some of the options we have at the bottom. First, we'll take a look at this circle button. What this does is change the starting point of our line. So right now, you can see at the top of our screen, it says start by 0.102. Let's say that the start distance of 2 feet we actually wanted at the bottom point. Well, if I click this circle, it's going to change our start distance to 0.103. Important to note, and we'll clear again first, whichever point I choose first, if I don't just simply select a line, that will be my starting point. See how start is at the bottom. If I choose 0.102 first, our starting point will be at the top. The second option we have to look at the bottom is our button with a line and an arrow. If we click this button, it will flip the points from one side of the line to the other side of the line, while maintaining the same starting point so that start distance does not get changed. If I click it one more time, it will actually put points on both sides of the line. Let's get it over to our right, and we'll hit Create. Now, the last option we need to look at in our line offset menu is single versus multiple points. Notice we've been on multiple points this entire time. We are creating multiple points on a set offset and a set interval with a set start distance down that entire line. However, if I check the single point box, my options will change. I will not have my interval option anymore. I instead have a vertical offset option, so I can offset that point on a specific elevation. We still do have our horizontal offset option and a start distance option. Let's go to our plan here. A common use case of this single point in the real world would be to find control hubs that the surveyor gave us from the corners of our building. For example, let's go to Create and Line Work quickly and reconnect the dots between points 106 and 100 and 103. So we're looking at a simple foundation plan. Now the surveyors came in and they gave us 5-foot offsets from our building, squared off of the building on a 45. So if we go back to Create and Point Manager, we can go back to our Line Offset menu and click Single Point. Now I will come into my Edit button, and I already have in my single point offset 5-foot horizontal offset, which is correct. However, I need to change my vertical offset to 0. Start distance, we will change from -5 inches to -5 feet. So we will be horizontally offsetting the point 5 feet off the line on the same elevation, but we will be starting 5 feet before that line even begins. Now we have to choose the line I'd like to offset. Let's choose 100 to point 106. So I'll click my point 100 and then point 106. Now we have a 5-foot offset from the line horizontally, and it is starting 5 feet before that line even exists. Let's hit Create. I also named it CP1 for Control Point 1. Therefore, this is the first control point that the surveyors gave us. Let's do the same on corner 102. So I will choose my 102 point down to my 103 point, and my point is starting 5 feet off the line horizontally and 5 feet before the line even exists. Note that if I needed to, I could change the location of that point by flipping it one way or the other, and I could change that start distance at the bottom, flip it whichever way I needed to. And I do need a point down there, so let's hit Create, and we'll do the same thing at the top here. Create, and finally, we can hit our last point at the top left on point 101. Create. Now I have 4 control points that would be in the real world offset from the foundation that I need to pour. This is an easy way to create many offsets very efficiently. That's it for line offsets, creating single or multiple point offsets from a line or 2 points. Let's move on to our radius offset option. In our radius offset option, it works very similarly to our line work offset option. We just do the same thing with a radius. So here at the top, I have a radius that I'd like to offset. I will click on that radius, and you can see it begins to make those offset points for me. If I go into my pen and paper or input form button, here is my offset that I can enter in. Let's do 1 foot. My interval, let's do 2 feet. A start distance, which we can keep at 0. And the radius is already determined because I clicked on that line. Here, if we look at the bottom of our screen, we will see that those values were input correctly. We have a 1-foot offset every 2 feet down that line with a 0-foot starting radius directly over top of this point 200, and the radius snaps right to that line on a 15-foot. We still have the option to flip that from one side to the other or on both sides. We can also change the starting point of the line. After we are happy, we can hit Create. In the same way that we can create offset lines just based on 2 points, we can also create a radius offset based on 2 points. Notice, since I did not click on a specific radius, I will need to input a few more details. Number 1 being the radius that I want. Let's say that we have a 10-foot radius. Now, I only want a short chord going from here to here, not the full radius that it's showing currently. So I can click my short chord to long chord button at the bottom, and I could also flip that on either side, depending on what I want. You also have your change starting point at the bottom. I want this current radius that we see. So I am now happy. I want these offsets just as they show every 2 feet, 1 foot off of the line. I'm going to hit Create. And that's how we can create offsets off of an existing radius from our line work or from our CAD model, or based on points with a radius value that we input. The last option in our Point Manager screen is finding a center point between 2 lines. Let's click our final menu at the bottom. It tells you select 2 lines and tap between them to preview that center point. So very simply following that direction, if I tap 2 lines, one at the top, one at the bottom here, anywhere I click in the middle of my screen, it's going to find a center point directly between those 2 lines. This can be handy if trying to very quickly calculate the center point of a wall. Notice, we can't control exactly where left to right it's going to be, but wherever we click, it will end up directly in between those 2 lines. And that concludes our tutorial for the Create and Point Manager menu.